Join me on a fascinating journey where I show you some of the techniques used in scale aeromodelling. Hello again modelers, and we're back in the workshop. Today I'm going to attempt to join the front and the rear half of the fuselage. It's broken cleanly right on the bulkhead just behind the wing fairings. And the reason it's broken there is because the sheeting does not go over the bend in the fuselage. There's a band that goes around the fuselage on the Chipmunk on the full size, and at that point the cone becomes the front, the front is parallel sided. The tail section is a cone. So where the two meet, the sheeting obviously has to go through a bend. And what Seagull have done is they've effectively just butt jointed all the sheeting at that point. So that there's very little structure inside to protect it from breaking. And in fact, what there is some 1/8 light ply by about 1/2 inch thick that in 3 places. And 2 of those places, there are also 1/4 inch wide, 1/8 inch thick notches cut into that. So there really is only 3 pieces of 1/4 inch wide, 1/8 inch thick light ply holding the tail to the front. So I am not surprised that this is broken, and I'm not surprised others have broken in this place. So what I did was I stood the fuselage on this block of foam that you can see here, and I positioned the rear onto it, trying to push together all the parts that seem to interlock, and they seem to come back together quite nicely. And it did look nice and straight, and the butt was right up against the front. So I was happy that it was true. And I thought, oh, well, this will work if I could just hold it like this while I glued it. And I thought, well, I wonder if it'll stand on its nose. So I stood it onto the block of foam, nose down, and pressed the tail onto it to keep it in position. And it stayed put. And I thought, I wonder. So I then flooded it with CA around that joint, just to hold it well enough that I could lay it on the bench and then add some more structure and beef it back up again and repair some bits that were broken. And that did actually work. And that is the point at which the video starts. So I'm sorry you haven't seen me actually hold it as a big sort of tower, because it nearly hit the ceiling. There's no way I could have filmed it on my own. But that's what I did. I just pushed the 2 halves together without doing any work on either half. Pushed them together. It seemed to fit. CA'd all the way around the edges to make it strong, and then very gently laid it on the bench. And then you'll see what I get up to next as the video progresses. It's interesting. It seems to have worked. I'm going to attempt to put the tail back onto the fuselage, and I'm not sure how this is going to work, but this is a warts and all video, so we'll see if it works. If it doesn't, what I've done is I've mixed some epoxy, and I'm going to mix with it some West Systems 406 colloidal silica. Now, there's lots of different stuff, products that you can mix with epoxy to do different things. Micro balloons will make a nice filleting material that's fairly light. This, however, this is colloidal silica, and what this does is it makes a very hard joint or filler. So micro balloons makes it, very light and a little bit full of air, and it's easy to sand. This is the opposite. This makes it heavy, makes it more dense, and fairly difficult to sand. Not difficult, but stubborn. So as you can see, I'm just trying to mix it together. I should have put it in a pot, really, a mixing pot, but it will work this way, but a mixing pot probably would have been better. So all I'm doing is making a paste. So this is so that the epoxy doesn't run off the joint, and simply I can use it then as a filleting material, which is what it's really for. You can see how it's now getting nice and creamy, a lot more dense. So what I've done with the fuselage, now whether this is right or whether this is wrong, I am not sure. I'm going with what I've got. So I've managed to push the 2 parts back together without doing too much work to either part. And where they've all meshed together, I flooded it with CA, and it has actually held well enough to stay in one piece, which is amazing. But what I need to do is I need to get some bits and pieces into these joints just to make them a little bit more substantial. So what I'm thinking of doing is removing the film from the tail section around here, and then I'm going to use glass cloth, probably even carbon tissue, to bridge the gap between the balsa from the front half to the second half. It's not an ideal way of doing it, but what I'm thinking I'm going to try and achieve is a sort of a monocoque section. What I'm doing at the moment though is I'm just doing a fillet along here, and I'm forcing the epoxy into the joint. You can see how nice it is as a filleting material now that it's got this colloidal silica mixed in with it. Just keep forcing it into the gap. Now what I'm going to also do is I'm going to try and get some in the fillet at the bottom there, where the bulkhead, which was attached to the forward half, joins the tail section. And this is a little bit difficult to get in there and do this. The problem was, you know, how much work do you do to each half to make the two halves mate? And the way Seagull have built this is actually not very good. And I love Seagull, don't get me wrong, I love their products. But this I'm not impressed with. Because the sheeting comes in at an angle at this point, right along here. So that actually the sheeting is cracked, and actually, so it comes to here, then there's another piece of sheeting here, so it's a butt joint. That's a really, really bad idea. So, so the only thing that really sort of keeps it all in check is some ply that runs down the sides on the inside to the back, and it actually is slotted to fit into the bulkhead, so actually it is only 1/8 of an inch wide. So I'm really not surprised these are breaking at this point. I'm really not surprised at all. Right, so that's all of that epoxy slathered into that area there. Now I can't get in there with this tool. I have to use something else to do this. So what I'm going to use, I think, is probably just a barbecue skewer. I'm sorry if you can't really see what's going on back here, but let me try and move the aircraft around a little bit. I appreciate it's not very easy to see what I'm doing, but I've actually put quite a bit of the silicone, the colloidal silica and epoxy in that bulkhead joint at the bottom there. And I'm just using this barbecue skewer to drive it down to the bottom of the joint and to blend it into the area where the sheeting meets. Now it's not ideal, I know, and it's not perfect, but what I intend to do next is to put some sheeting, put some fiberglass or carbon tissue over the joint on the inside and on the outside to try and reinforce it. It's very difficult to see what I'm doing here, so almost impossible for you to see it, I'm sure. But all I'm doing is spreading the epoxy around to bridge the gap. Now there are areas here where, you know, the epoxy is not meeting, the plywood parts, sorry, are not meeting where they were, because they've sort of broken and fragmented away a little bit. I'm not worrying about putting the original structure back the way it was. What I'm going to try and do is just use enough of the structure to hold it together while I add some glass cloth for the inside and the outside. So I think I'm probably going to have to sheet the outside so that I can join this bit here and this bit here to make it strong enough to handle. And I think the glass tape on the outside going right around the outside and the bit on the inside is going to be doing all the work. And then lay another piece. The basswood ideally will go from about here to a similar distance back there and be laid straight across this, but it's only that thick. So and that's going to have to do most of the work, and then the glass cloth around the outside, creating the monocoque for the lower section. That's the best I can think of at the moment, but I will keep thinking and we'll get there. We'll figure it out. This is a tricky fix. Okay, I think I have a plan. So what I'm doing just now is I'm mixing up some more epoxy. So I'm going to mix some epoxy up. I'm just going to, there it's set to 0.005, that's close enough I think. And I'm going to need to mix a fair bit, so it's 50-50 with this epoxy. So there is 2 grams, nearly. 0.931, 1.9, 2.09, that's it, 2.1. In fact, it's just rolled around to 2.1. So we'll put 4.2. We'll take this up to 4.2. There we go, that's 4.22, which is pretty close. I usually do it by eyeball, so actually weighing it is very accurate. Put that away so it doesn't get messed up. And then I'm going to mix some colloidal silica in there as well. We'll give it a stir. As you can see, it's much easier to mix in a pot than it is on the piece of paper or on the mixing pads. I probably should have mixed the resin and the hardener together first before I put in the colloidal silica, because it's a little bit harder to mix when it's got everything, all 3 parts in there. So I'll just have to do a bit more thorough. Still using it as an adhesive, but a gap filling adhesive, and I probably won't use all of this, but I want to make sure I've got enough to do the job. Whatever gets left in the pot gets left in the pot. There we go. No, it's a sort of a still a little bit runny, but much thicker than it was as just pure epoxy. This workshop is disgusting and really needs a really good tidy up. So I usually do that between models, between builds, but I haven't on this occasion. Right, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to glue in these 2 pieces of basswood along the sides here. Right, so we'll coat the basswood first. Obviously this is adding weight to the model that wasn't on it before, so I've got to be reasonably conservative with it, but at the end of the day the model must be strong again. So you can see it's not actually taking a lot to coat this. In fact, that's probably too much of a scoop there, but I also want to make sure I've put enough on that it doesn't actually fill in any voids. Shouldn't be any, but made sure that the area that this is going down is true, straight, smooth, no lumps. So we should be okay. Yeah, so I've used a lot more glue than I've mixed a lot more glue than I need, so we're going to end up with a load left over. Right, so what I do have to do before I put that in place is there's an area under there that needs some glue. because that's where this beam is going to touch. I'll just do the other side while I'm in there. And this is going to transfer a little bit of the loads to that bulkhead. So let's try and fit this gummy gooey mess. Now I know I'm going to come to just in front of that section there, because I want to key into that structure, the front there. I'll put a clamp on it. And now we need to do the other one. I'll show you how I'm going to clamp the rear in a minute. It's going to be fiddly, but maybe not so bad. Loads more epoxy than I really needed to, as you can see. But I'd rather have too much and waste it than have to wait halfway through the job to mix some more. This is a 20-minute epoxy, so I have about 20 minutes worth. Well, actually, probably more like 15 minutes, 10 minutes maybe, minimum of time to work it, so I can't mess around. But so far nothing's happening, it's not even thinking about setting at the moment, so we're good. So that goes in there, similar to the other one, and it goes just in front of that bulkhead. Goes like that, and it's pushed up against this section here. We get my clamp in there. Another one there, it's just bowing very slightly. Oh, I think it's in contact, it's alright. So this bit is going to be the clever bit, if I can make it work. So what I've got is just a piece of 3/16 by quarter balsa, and I'm going to try and just feed it down through this gap and then force. It's a little bit longer than the diagonal, than the distance in there, and I'm just gently moving it further down the fuselage until I can't reach any further, and then I'm straightening it out. i.e. pushing it so that the diagonal becomes a straight line. Not sure if you can see the piece of wood just there. Let's angle it up a little bit more. You can possibly just see the piece of wood at the back there. So it goes from one side to the other, but it's a little bit longer than the gap. So as you try and force it, it pushes the two bits of wood apart, and it's bringing them into contact with the sides, which is exactly what we need to do. So we'll let that go off for 20 minutes, and then we'll have a look and see if we've actually achieved what I was hoping to achieve. So while I've got this excess resin, I may as well glue a few bits back that got removed. One such part, one part was here. This is one of the cowl mounting blocks. Oh, it's gone hard on me. Well, that's a nuisance, isn't it? It's been an hour. This should all be well settled now. It was nearly dry earlier. So these runners now are taking a lot more of the load. Pop that out. That was the stick that was sort of straightened up to apply some strength in there. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to, because that won't be strong enough to fly, I'm going to take the film off the area around the roundel. In fact, I'm going to remove the roundel first. I've got some new ones on their way. Funnily enough, these roundels, 95p for two, 95p for a pair. These are 3.5 inch. cost more to ship them than it did to actually to buy them. So what I've actually done is I've bought a whole set, wing roundels, fuselage roundels, the whole lot. That's actually pulled the paint off. That's interesting, isn't it? So the new roundel will have to go straight over that. I'll do the one on the other side. I'm doing this because I need to take the film away underneath so I can get to the bare wood under here. Cool, these are very, very stuck. The other side where it lifted the paint off probably made it a lot easier. But that just shows you how well that glass coat stuck to the horror cover. And that was without any scuffing, nothing at all, just straight onto the horror cover. That really is stuck. And I'm really pulling and it's not lifted the silver. It did on the other side obviously, but it may well be that I contaminated the other side with something on my hands or something. Don't know. But the roundels will go back exactly in the same place, so I won't have to take the silver too far back. If I can't get the silver to match on the wings, which will be my test, then that'll probably mean I won't be able to get the silver to match here as well. So I may have to go all the way back to the blue line and mask right on the blue line so that my silver all sort of flows. Anyway, we'll see. When I do the wings, that'll be a bit of a test of how well I can blend the silver. What I am slightly aware, alarmed about, or not alarmed, but I'm cautious about, is if I cover this in glass cloth, then it's going to be very difficult to put the film, the horror cover, over the top of glass cloth. That's always an issue because you get bubbles in it. It's never easy. But it is an ARTF at the end of the day, so I think just have to accept that we're going to have trouble. And one of the things I am thinking about as well in the back of my head, and I guess you guys will probably do the same thing, but you can't just switch off to stuff while you're working on it. You're thinking about problems that are going to arise. And the one that's arising at the moment is this going to be strong enough? Actually, there's no point in going any higher because I can't reinforce this bit because there's nothing there to reinforce. So all I can do is across here and around the bottom. I am kind of alarmed as well, or wary of whether or not the fuselage is actually mounted straight. I'm pretty sure it is because the joint has closed up all the way around, so I think it's exactly where it was. Whether it was straight before, I don't know. It flew all right, so it should be the same. I don't think it'll fly any different. It's as straight as it was. So I know a couple of people that have repaired chipmunks that have had this same problem where they've broken across this joint, and they've used plumb lines and everything to make sure it's all accurate. I've not had to do that, or I've not done that, because it does seem to have slotted back together exactly as it was when it came apart. But I will check with an incidence meter once we've got the wings on, just to make sure that I haven't messed around with the incidence on the tailplane. I was considering rearranging this section in here and changing the rear tail fairing, the rear wing fairing, to make it more accurate. But actually it's not far off, and there are lots of things that are not right, so I think I'm just going to leave this as it is, just put it back together. But the front fairing, I can't live with that, so I will amend that. I'm going to do the other side first because I want to leave this bit through here visible because I can see how the sheeting's been curved and cut. Now the idea is to add some glass sheeting across here and up the sides, but I think for now what I'm going to do is put some glass sheeting across here. I'm going to sand this down a little bit to get it smoother. I think what I might do actually first of all is I'm going to sand that, and if there is a gap there I'm going to colloidal silica and seal that. I think that's going to be wise. So I'm just going to glass this section here, and I'll probably put one piece of 25 gram cloth over the full bit, then I'll come in a centimetre, another sheet, another centimetre in, so each patch will get smaller and smaller but will be the thickest right along that seam. I think that's the safest way to do this. Anyway, I'll mix some stuff up and then we'll take a look. I'm going to mix a little bit of colloidal silica with it again. I'm really enjoying the bond that the paste seems to make. Won't put too much with it, I don't need it to be too thick. You'll notice this time I mixed the epoxy together first before I added the colloidal silica. Just makes it a bit of a thicker mix. And as an adhesive it just means it's got a better gap filling property, and this stuff is strong. Right, so I'm just going to put some on these flanges, and it's going to ooze out somewhat when I fit it on. Not sure if you can actually see what I'm doing here. There we go. Now it's important when you use this stuff, when you thicken it like this, that you scrape all the stuff that's in the way off. Otherwise you might find it's difficult to sand. Do the other one. This area will get sheeted over afterwards anyway. That's for the cowl anchorage. Now while I've got some of this stuff mixed up, so looking at the underneath of the fuselage just here, I'm just going to force some of this into this gap. The gap doesn't look open at the moment. That's because when I just sanded it, some of the dust went into that gap. So I'm forcing this in on top of that, pushing it all down in. Now, as I said earlier, don't leave any of this proud because it's much harder to sand than the surrounding balsa. So it won't be easy. You'll be creating a rod for your own back. So just be careful and be aware of that. Now I'm also going to go in and fill up some of these areas that got a bit mashed. They've not gone back together perfectly. So I want to just fill the area around them. Okay, I've mixed up some resin. Those new scales are brilliant, really are brilliant. So I've done this 4 to, I think it was 0.6, I can't exactly remember now, but I've got a little chart on the side of the epoxy so that I know the ratios that I need. So that should do us. And I've cut some squares of, well, not quite squares, but sections of cloth ready to apply. So what I'm going to do is one straight over the middle and then spread these out overlapping as we go. So the one over the middle, well, what I'll do first, I'm going to put some resin over the whole area. People say to me, why don't you thin it with alcohol or acetone or something to thin the epoxy? But I would advise against that, because the people that make the epoxy, West Systems, do say do not thin the stuff. They seem to soak in better, but it actually changes the state of the epoxy and how hard it ends up. So it's not a good idea. So be very careful before you go adding thinner to make the resin thinner. Right, I'm going to put one piece right across the joint, because that's the problematic area. And we'll just stipple that in. This is 25 gram cloth. It's very light. The problem's going to be, I don't want to create a ridge where the glass ends, because I've got to cover this in film, which is never a very good idea either. Film covering over glass cloth, you end up with bubbles like crazy. So what it would have been a nice idea would be to have covered this in glass cloth and not used a plastic film at all, but to cover the tailplane area in glass would be a little bit, well, be a lot of work, but who knows, I might attempt it. But at the end of the day, this is an ARTF, and it never will be any more than that. It's a wonderful flyer, and it's great for competitions, scale competitions, because it flies so well in almost any weather. I've flown in some howling gales where the quarter scale models have really struggled. So I am very impressed with it. However, it can never do well in static because it is an ARTF. So it is limited in its use for competition flying. And to be honest, I like to build my own anyway. So I think it will always only ever be an ARTF. So there's no point in going absolutely overboard and building a whole new this and a whole new that and everything else. It's quite difficult to actually see where I've put the cloth and where I haven't. So I think I've put one down there and one either end. So we'll put another one across the middle. Not that one though. I want that other large one, that one. So we'll put that one across the middle. There will be cloth all the way around this joint in the end. But at the moment I'm just beefing this up so that I can remove the two pieces of side sheeting, balsa sheeting, so that I can replace it, because the sheeting on the side is just temporary, it's split, and the edge is not true. So so the sheeting on the sides will get replaced next. But now this last bit, I'm just going to overlap just on the joint, and that's all. As I said, this is only 25 gram cloth, so it's not very heavy. Well, it's not very heavy weight cloth. And what I'm trying to do is make a monocoque of this area, so that it's the shell that's doing the work and not the structure underneath. Because the structure underneath of this, I am, as I said earlier, quite disappointed in Seagull that there isn't really anything joining the front to the rear. There is some light ply underneath all this, but the light ply is about 1/2 inch wide by 1/8 of an inch thick. But it is notched to take doublers and formers and stuff like that, which is ridiculous. So that 1/2 inch wide section is actually only 1/4 of an inch wide. So you've got 3 1/4 inch wide sections spanning this, and the balsa sheeting does not span it. It is a butt joint all the way around that bulkhead. That's really not very wise. Anyway, as you can see, that's now done. We're just going to let that go off. I'll leave the pot as a witness so I know how far along it is without having to touch this. Oops, that's a bit of thread in there that needs tamping down. So we'll just just leave that. That's going to take a few hours to go off. So I think what I'll do is I'll call it quits at the video at this point, and go and do some editing of what I've done today. And then we'll come back tomorrow and we'll take a look at that and see how it's gone. And if it's all okay, then we'll start taking the sides off, start doing the wing fairings. And in fact, probably take a lot of this sheeting off in preparation for, for putting it all back on. But we're making real good progress here. I was surprised how well the tail joined up to the front. It all mated, all the brakes and everything sort of butted together nicely. So although I didn't film it, because I didn't think it was going to work, I just held the two parts together and they seem to lock. I think we've done as good a job as we can, and I think it's actually going to be stronger than it was originally, believe it or not. So so you never know. Anyway, we'll take a look at it when it's all finished, when it's all dried rather, and go from there. But I think we're making great progress. If you're enjoying the series, please click like and subscribe. I'll see you on the next one.